Mizzou's quarterback competition still unfolding. Oklahoma figuring out its offensive line. What are the top storylines between Oklahoma and Missouri football coming up on Locked On Crossover Edition?
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to a special Locked On Crossover Edition featuring John Miller of Locked On Mizzou and myself, John Williams of Locked On Sooners. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase over at Gametime. Again, he's John Miller. Go check him out on the Locked On Mizzou podcast, getting you covered with all of your top stories, top news items, the best analysis covering Missouri Tigers football. I'm John Williams of Locked On Sooners. And John, let's just start with fall camp because we're now in week 0. So technically fall camp is over. We've started the 2025 college football season. What is the buzz like? What's the feels like for Missouri Tigers fans coming out of fall camp?
Well, a lot of uncertainty at the two maybe most important positions on offense. Obviously quarterback, but I would say left tackle as well, a name you Sooners fans are going to be familiar with. Caden Green has now moved late in camp over from left guard to left tackle to hopefully plug a hole there. But the interesting thing is I think the buzz around the rest of the roster for Missouri is pretty strong. So if you suddenly get answers at those two positions, I think you're looking at a pretty good team.
What do you think about wide receiver? Because you lose Luther Burden, you lose Theo Weiss, another former Oklahoma Sooner, off to the NFL. What's wide receiver going to look like for the Tigers?
Well, the thing is, I'm glad you brought up Weiss because most people are looking at Luther Burden. Obviously, he's the big name, not only from high school, he was a high NFL draft pick as well, high second round there, and some people thought that was too low, myself included.
Including
but to me, Coleman for Burden, though. Coleman is a guy with so much experience, especially in the slot. I'm not saying he's necessarily going to be as good as Burden, but that's about as close of a one-for-one trade as I think you can realistically get. I think Weiss's production on the outside is actually a bigger question mark to me. I really like Marquise Johnson. I really like Josh Manning's potential. I just think we need to see it more with Josh Manning or whoever ends up playing most of the reps on the outside. I think the Weiss production is something I'm a little bit more worried about than even the Burden production, maybe counterintuitively.
Well, I mean, he was a really good player. I mean, Theo Weiss, especially last year for Missouri, he was fantastic. We saw it in Oklahoma's game against the Tigers up in Columbia. He made huge plays, especially on the final few drives that helped Missouri get that win. So, I mean, he was clutch. I mean, in big moments, he came through for Missouri, and that's hard to replace. But that's also kind of the beauty of college football, right? So much you project out, but also there's so much mystery to what you can expect. And Oklahoma's kind of dealing with similar things at wide receiver. We didn't really have any wide receivers last year and none of them are coming back. The only one that's back of any significance was Deion Burks, but even still, we don't really know what his potential is until we get him for a full season. So it's just a wild kind of an off season of a lot of projection out, in the quarterback position. What's happening? Because I think everybody expected Beau Pribula to be the starter, but it sounds like Sam Horn has kind of entered his name legitimately into the conversation.
Yeah, that's certainly the word out of camp, although I will caution everyone, of course, this time of year, we get a lot of misinformation, I would say, to be certain, and also this is the era where everybody on the Missouri beat, and I'm sure this is the case on the Oklahoma beat for the most part too, you don't really get to see a lot of live football action. Right. So I will say it is still my expectation. If you're gonna ask me who's gonna start week 1 and week 2, more importantly against Kansas, I do think it's gonna be Beau Pribula, but it's an open question at the moment. It really is. Missouri just this past weekend took a road practice / scrimmage up in the St. Louis area. Missouri doesn't leave the state until October, so I think that was part of the calculation there. Yeah. I do think another part of the calculation was, hey, we're going to actually scrimmage here because they do want to settle some things, certainly on the offensive line. I think quarterback could be a part of it too. To me, my biggest question is this a high quality problem? You got two good guys, or is it a low quality problem? The old, hey, if you got two quarterbacks, you don't have any.
Yeah, there's definitely a difference in we've got good competition, and that's why we haven't been able to make a decision versus we're not sure either of these guys are going to be ready to play week one. And so we're not sure who's going to be the guy. It's certainly, you never know exactly how that's going to play out, but there seems to be at least a little bit of confidence that one of these guys is going to be able to step up to the challenge, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty confident that one of these guys will be able to step in there. And really, the thing is, I think you need two quarterbacks more often than not, too. Missouri saw this last season. We had to start Drew Pine in a couple of games, including against the Oklahoma Sooners. Yep. By the way, hey, it ended up working out, but not quite as well as against Oklahoma, obviously, where the Missouri offense was shut out. So regardless, I think you've got Drew Pine. Quite honestly, he was a solid backup quarterback, but his physical limitations became pretty obvious and pretty apparent against Alabama in particular. But I don't think we're going to have that problem if Sam Horn is the backup. He's at least a guy who's 6'4", athletic, can come in there and throw it at a major league baseball high type of quality level. So we're not going to have the physical limitations problem with your backup, at least.
Is there an area maybe going into the season, though, that you feel like, hey, we've got significant question marks and I'm not sure if we have an answer?
I mean, other than those two positions, honestly, not really. And that's the good thing about this Missouri roster. I mean, you're going to ask, okay, cornerback, maybe. I wouldn't say it's a huge weakness, but I mean, it's all relative, right? I just don't think there are many questions on the Missouri front, the Missouri linebacker core, even the Missouri safeties. I think maybe you can pick some nits on the outside, but those are some guys with some experience now. It's not as though Missouri's just throwing young, unproven players out there. And if the defense is as good as I think it's going to be, well, obviously the back end doesn't matter as much. So again, I'm coming back really to obviously quarterback and left tackle, but since you brought up Theo Weiss, once again, I do think outside receivers a bit more of a question than a lot of Missouri fans are bringing up right now.
You got to have guys that can go out and make plays.
Yep.
You know, it comes down to it. You know, you can have players that have speed or they have size, but if they don't go out and make a play, it doesn't really matter what the traits look like. You know, we saw a couple guys at Oklahoma last year that had good speed or good size, but weren't consistent enough to go out and make plays. And I think that's the part of college football that's so fascinating sometimes is, unlike the NFL, you can kind of project out, like Oklahoma or the Dallas Cowboys still have CeeDee Lamb. We know CeeDee Lamb's going to be great year in, year out until his contract is up and he's no longer part of the Dallas Cowboys. With college football, there's so much turnover that happens every single offseason that even though we can project out a little bit, it's still hard to know exactly what we're going to get.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's true with Missouri. I think it's true for Oklahoma as well, a team that obviously has high expectations, has high hopes of bouncing back offensively. But hey, anytime you've got a new quarterback, a new offensive coordinator, a whole bunch of new receivers, I mean, you never know how it's going to play out.
No, you don't quite know exactly how things are going to play out, but I think both teams have some high expectations for 2025. We'll talk about some of those things coming up next here on a Locked On crossover edition.
And this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. And of course, with the college football season right around the corner, preseason heating up, now's the perfect time to get your eye on big name quarterbacks, breakout running backs, or for me, I've got my eye on a couple of really deep tight ends. I think week one, these guys could really bust out for you potentially, or maybe just keep them back in your quiver for the later in the season. Ben Sinnott of the Washington Commanders, also Gunnar Helm of Tennessee. You know who really likes him? Cam Ward, their new quarterback. That seems like an important thing to note to me. Well, download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. It's PrizePicks. Run your game. And if you're trying to stay on top of your routine, even during this brutally hot stretch of the summer where, well, hydration is where it all starts, and that's where DripDrop comes in. When I'm on top of my hydration, I notice everything works better. My energy, my mood, my focus. But getting enough fluids every day isn't always easy, and that's why I love using DripDrop. It's something I've really become accustomed to putting in my golf bag all the time. And we're talking about something that is doctor developed, scientifically proven for a fast hydration. And right now, DripDrop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head to DripDrop.com and use promo code LockedOnCollege. That's DripDrop.com, promo code LockedOnCollege for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard.
And we talked about expectations kind of briefly, but for Missouri, you mentioned they don't leave the state of Missouri for a while in the 2025 season. Has that helped kind of frame some of the expectations? Because Eli Drinkwitz has done a pretty good job over the last couple of years. I know I take my pot shots at Eli. I know I do, but he's done a good job over the last couple of years, overcoming some of the marginal success or average success, we should say, the first few years with the Tigers.
Yeah, what was the question there? Sorry, I got lost in your insults to Eli Drinkwitz and wanted to choke you quite. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead. Yeah. What was the question?
No, the question was just coming into this season now with so much turnover, you've got a schedule that sets up pretty well. Are the expectations still pretty high? Looking at a 10-win season, competing for a playoff spot.
Sure. I mean, definitely the schedule sets up similarly to how it did last year in that, well, I believe 4 straight home games to start the season last year, 6 straight, believe it or not, to start this season, including a bye week thrown in there right before the Crimson Tide. So there is no doubt that the schedule is advantageous. I think people need to pump the brakes on calling it easy. It's easy compared to the rest of the SEC. It's relative to what it could be. But what's interesting to me is you look at it, all the schedule metrics still have Missouri as like a top 25, top 30 type schedule. And when you see similar schedule rankings for Tennessee, for instance, I just don't see the same level of national outrage. That 16th out of 16th really catches people's eye, but no doubt compared to the Oklahoma Sooners schedule, for instance, well, Missouri got a much better draw here the past couple seasons. We'll see how that shakes out when the SEC reshuffles it here next season.
Well, I think the thing that is interesting about Missouri's schedule isn't that it's necessarily easy, because you have South Carolina, like in that first month of the season.
Sure.
You've got Alabama, like you mentioned, pretty early on in the first half of the year. And then that Kansas game, that's not one to sleep on.
Could be tricky. Yeah, it's a rivalry.
This is not your older brother's Kansas team. Like, this is a very good Kansas team that could trip up a Tigers team that, again, is working through a lot of turnover.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I don't anticipate that happening. I think Missouri will take care of Kansas, but there's no doubt, especially with Jaden. I think it's important that Jalen Daniels, I think for Kansas, it's better that they're getting Missouri in week 2 instead of the traditional last week of the season, because Daniels is a guy who's a very good player, a very good college quarterback, but a guy who's been banged up at times in his career. So if he can get through the season, Kansas will probably outpace expectations, and they certainly have a better chance to have a healthy quarterback in week 2 than they would coming to Columbia in week 12. Probably a slight advantage for KU there.
Yeah, it makes a big, big difference. That dude is so good, but he's just had such a hard time staying on the football field. And for Oklahoma, you talked about its schedule, but man, I don't think it's necessarily as difficult as what the metrics want to make it out to be. Yes, they have teams that are going to rank really high, like a Texas who's number 1 in the nation, Alabama who's top 5, Tennessee who's going to be a top 25, Mizzou who's just outside the top 25 in some places, but we're catching these teams in a turnover year. All those teams last year, you had a Jackson Dart at Ole Miss. You had an experienced Quinn Ewers at Texas. Now everybody's expecting Arch to be better, but will he be really good that first Red River Showdown? You're going from experienced quarterbacks in, Drew Pine. Even though he was the backup, he was an experienced guy that Oklahoma had to face in that one. So it's a little bit different to me that, yes, by the metrics, Oklahoma's schedule looks really, really tough on paper. But again, a lot of quarterback turnover aside from places like South Carolina and LSU with Garrett Nussmeier.
Yeah. To your point, I think I'm expecting 2026 to be the real breakout season for Missouri, simply because, like you say, new quarterback, new a lot of different stuff, new offensive line to a great extent. I think traditionally you do see that second year, that's when you see the real breakout. A lot of people have pointed that out. I'm certainly one of them. The only thing I'll pump the brakes a little bit and disagree with you that, well, Drew Pine, he had experience. Yeah, he was a little bit experienced. I just think that whoever it is at quarterback for Missouri is going to provide a better challenge for Oklahoma than Drew Pine did last season. And I'm curious, by the way, what's your take on, is there any update on this whole John Mateer Venmo gambling alleged situation? Is there any other update on from the Oklahoma side?
It's a big nothing burger.
Okay.
I mean, Oklahoma's like, nothing's being investigated. The NCAA hasn't said they're investigating anything, and that's kind of where it's at. Nobody's really talked about it since. He said it was just some dumb jokes that he and his friends were making over Venmo. I don't think anybody's really all that concerned about it. If it does become something of significance, I'd be curious what the NCAA's actual response would be, considering how light they went on Michigan for actually cheating and actually affecting game outcomes. I don't think this would be something that could cost him games, but the NCAA is so hard to read sometimes that you never know what they're going to do exactly. But I do think that everybody feels better about the backup quarterback situation going into this year than we were last year. I mean, last year, so much went wrong for Oklahoma on the injury front that it didn't create an advantageous situation for anybody to develop, whether it was Jackson Arnold or Michael Hawkins. Now, Michael Hawkins was a true freshman last year, went on the road and actually beat Auburn, looked good in some moments, but all reports out of camp are he feels a lot more comfortable in Ben Arbuckle's offense right now than what he did a year ago, and he's looking a lot better as a player than he did a year ago. So I think whatever happens with John Mateer at quarterback, things are at least trending in a positive direction. I just don't think it's going to become much of an issue.
I just want to know what the joke is exactly. Is it simply just thumbing your nose at authority? Was that the joke? Because I'm just trying, like, what was the setup? What was the punchline? I'm not saying it has to be funny. Just explain it to me.
Okay. So you remember back when you were in college, right? And your mom calls and you're with your buddies.
Sure.
And they just start saying a bunch of inappropriate things out loud while you're on the phone with your mom.
Sure.
Or you got your girl on the line and everybody's trying to say a bunch of inappropriate things. To me, that's what it was. It's like,
sure.
Okay, we just had this big in service at Washington State. Don't gamble, guys, because Iowa State and Iowa are getting in trouble for stuff, or just don't do it. Oh, let's be real funny and say, hey, I'm sending money to somebody via a gambling thing. Now, whether
plausible, I'm not sure I buy it. Is my point, but listen,
they very well could have been having some friendly bets on stuff, or they could.
Sounds like we're not going to get an investigation. Is the point? So,
and they may come back.
Yeah.
The NCAA has been a little bit busy with Michigan of late. So that's something that could come down the line, down the road. I'm not saying it won't. Is it plausible? Yeah. Is it reality? I don't know, man.
Yeah,
and honestly, I don't care.
Sure.
Like we talk gambling so much in this sport, whether it's the big networks, we talk about it on our network, and it's just out there for everybody. It's like saying don't drink alcohol when it's in our face all the time. And so I'm not concerned about it. The school doesn't seem to be concerned about it. If it comes up, it's something they'll deal with down the road. But yeah, I don't know, man.
Okay. Just wondering if this was a situation Missouri fans should monitor or not.
Come back to me, I guess, in October,
sure.
As we get ready to have, Oklahoma, Missouri in November. But if it's something that pops up down the line, I'm sure it'll be a huge talking point. But for now, it's kind of just been swept under the rug, and both Mateer and the school released statements on it, and the school seems satisfied with Mateer's explanation. We'll see if the NCAA will be. We'll find out. So going into the 2025 season, what's the confidence level? I want to ask John, on a scale of 0 to 10, the confidence level for him or for Missouri fans going into the year. We'll do that coming up here on Locked On Sooners and Locked On Missouri. Sorry, force of habit.
And if you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about it from a customer's perspective. The last time you needed a service, if the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Well, maybe, but often you probably moved on to a competitor, and you don't want that. That's for sure. And that's why you need OpenPhone, so you never miss an opportunity to connect with your customers. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system designed to streamline and scale your customer communications. Do you juggle 2 phones just to keep business and personal calls separate? Well, OpenPhone solved that instantly. See why more than 60,000 businesses trust OpenPhone. They're offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnCollege. That's openphone.com/LockedOnCollege. They'll even port over your existing phone numbers for free. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers.
And thanks again for making Locked On Mizzou and Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Tune in and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, John, on a scale of 0 to 10, how confident are you feeling in the Missouri Tigers contending for a playoff spot this year?
Ooh, contending for a playoff spot. See, I was going to say 7.5, something like, but when you said contending for a playoff spot, that's lower confidence. I'm going to say 3 out of 10, something like that. I think they can get there, but would I bet on it? No, I wouldn't, because I just see Missouri as more like an 8-4, 9-3 type of team right now, which to me would be a pretty good season for the Tigers. I know it would be a step back technically from their last couple of seasons, but I would be pretty happy with that. Obviously, I'm greedy and I want for Missouri to win the whole thing and go undefeated, but realistically, I think that's about right. So I can't say that I expect Missouri to make the playoff or anything like that.
Yeah, it's hard because you do see some difficult games on the schedule, and I even feel the same way for Oklahoma, that I don't know that they're going to make the playoff, but I feel like they could get to November and kind of be in the hunt.
Sure.
But then they've got, Missouri, Tennessee, Alabama, and LSU in those final 4. And that's very much going to tell the story of what their 2025 season looks like. Is there a game on Missouri's schedule or even over the back half that's like, we got to win that one if we want to be a legit playoff contender?
Well, honestly, we probably got to win in Norman for the first time in since 1966. We're going to actually make the playoff. You're going to have to pull an upset, and really, I wouldn't view that as a huge upset. Although we were talking off the air a little bit. I think 7.5 is a little bit too high. Don't get me wrong. I think Oklahoma deserves to be favored, especially at this point in the season in Norman. I just think it should be more like 5.5, 6. So I'm quibbling a little bit here. But to me, I think that's one of those games, along with Missouri against Auburn, Missouri against Texas A&M. I mean, again, we can argue, quibble about the lines at this point all we want. I think in August, to me, I'm looking at those games as coin flips for the most part. So again, we'll look at it differently here in a couple months, but I don't know how I can have extreme confidence one way or the other if I'm Missouri or really about 6 or 7 of their opponents this season, including Sooners.
Yeah, I think that's true for a lot of the games in the SEC. If anything,
that's why I think it's going to be a wild season.
It's going to be, from what we saw in 2024 when Vandy beats Bama and Oklahoma beats Bama and Ole Miss loses to Kentucky. You're like, well, what game
played Texas a good ball game down in Nashville?
Right, exactly. It's just going to be a wide open season too. And you look at a lot of the national polls and national power rankings, things like that. Everybody's just expecting Texas to be number 1 from start to finish, but man, that's a tough ask for any team, especially in the SEC. As you look at the SEC, who's kind of your favorite to win it all right now? Is it Texas? Do you have somebody else that you have in mind?
I've been leaning toward Georgia all off season. I know they have some quarterback questions themselves, but to me, I just think they've earned the benefit of the doubt at this point. All off season, I've kind of had the main 3 teams that everybody else has had, Georgia, Alabama, and Texas, kind of in their own tier. I have to admit, the more I read and the more I think about it, I think I kind of want to move LSU into that next tier. I really do. Have 4 teams in that top tier here. As much as I want to hate on Brian Kelly, I know it's the popular thing to do here in the SEC circles, but I don't know, man. That LSU team just seems like it has a heck of a lot of talent that they got through the portal. And by the way, a returning starter at quarterback, a guy a lot of people like for the NFL in the future too. They seem to have it all.
Yeah, Georgia is kind of my preseason pick right now. They were my preseason pick at SEC Media Days. Like you said, the benefit of the doubt. It's been a decade since Kirby Smart won fewer than 10 games.
Yep.
So if you're looking for consistency, and that's kind of what you want to look at when there's so much turnover happening across the conference, like Kirby Smart's the guy, like largely considered the best coach in college football. He's coming off of an SEC championship game, beat Texas twice last year, once with his backup quarterback. To me, Kirby Smart, I'm sure, is loving all of the bulletin board material, projecting somebody other than his team to go win it all.
I agree with you. That's how I've kind of felt about it all off season. And speaking of feelings, I do want to ask you one thing here. What is the feeling in Norman, in Oklahoma circles about this Missouri game? Like, how big of a game is this? Or is this one you all have circled on the calendar? Or since, again, Missouri hasn't won in Norman since the moon landing, is this just a game you all are assuming you'll win at this point?
I want to say it's one that people assume that Oklahoma will win, but that's largely based on history, right?
Yeah.
In the history of the matchup, Oklahoma has largely dominated the series, but it's got to be one that's circled on the calendar because it's the one that got away last year. Yep. Oklahoma had a chance to win that game and literally fumbled it away. So, you had a fall down situation, that allowed Drew Pine to connect with Luther Burden, to get Missouri into scoring position to tie the game late. It seemed like Oklahoma made some mistakes in that one that allowed Missouri to go win the game. And I think that's how they're feeling about it. Now, Missouri made some great plays. I'm not going to take anything away from, Luther Burden's catch, Theo Weese's catch over Eli Bowen. Like, those were huge plays. Drew Pine played out of his mind. You got just enough pass protection against R. Mason Thomas to get the ball off in those situations. So I don't want to take anything away from him, but Oklahoma, I think, feels like they let that one get away. And so that's going to be one that they're going to have circled on the calendar. Like, we got to get this one back. It's also been since 1966 that Missouri has beaten Oklahoma in back-to-back seasons. Hopefully we're not going to set history straight. Like, we're not going to create a new trivia question out of this season, but there's so many games on the schedule for Oklahoma that are kind of coin flip games that they have to prove something, going to Tuscaloosa, going to Neyland Stadium and playing Tennessee there, welcoming, going to South Carolina. That's a game I think that they have circled on the calendar too, because that one was over in the first 5 minutes of the game after 3 straight turnovers to start the game and being down 21-0. They didn't really get a chance to show who they were against South Carolina. So I think this whole season for Oklahoma is a get right season. Like, you erase everything that happened last year, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and you look forward and you say, no, this is the year that we remind everybody who Oklahoma is.
Well, I like you, John. I really do, but I truly hope your team does not get it right.
Of course. Yeah. Nobody wants to see Oklahoma do well. And for a good reason. I mean, if Oklahoma does return back to the level of success that's expected in Norman, then that just creates a bit more of a logjam at the top of the SEC. And it creates a lot more of a difficult path for other teams to ascend the mountain, and Missouri and Oklahoma in particular, like, we're recruiting Kansas, we're recruiting, this area of the country, the middle Midwest. And it's big. Like, Missouri's going into Kansas, Oklahoma's going into Kansas to try and find players.
Missouri and Oklahoma seem to be butting heads for a lot of recruits over the last few years, for sure.
Transfer portal guys. I mean,
Oklahoma, thank God we spent all those months talking about Williams Nwaneri, huh? That
really my gosh,
paid off for both of us, huh?
Yeah, just for him to end up at Nebraska.
Good times.
Yeah, hopefully Williams Nwaneri. But no, I mean, it may not be considered a quote unquote rival, but the historical and regional significance of this game, I think, is a lot of fun. And it's one of the things I was looking forward to about getting into the SEC. You don't play somebody over 90 times and not have some sort of energy and heat between
Sure.
the two. Both you and I are wrestling fans, so I think that's the right word, is right. Heat. There's heat
Yeah,
between
love it.
Oklahoma and Missouri fans, and even if we don't necessarily consider it a rival the same way we might consider Kansas for Missouri or Texas for Oklahoma, there's heat there, and it's a game that means something, and it matters a little bit. So I think everybody's excited for what it's going to be this year.
Heat is life, brother. Great point.
That's right. That's right. All right. Any parting things you want to say about Missouri before we get out of here?
Honestly, not really. I just kind of wanted to get your temperature on how Oklahoma fans were feeling about this, and I think I've got it here. Actually, maybe just some general Brent Venables thoughts. How we feeling about Brent?
I feel really good about Brent.
Okay.
It's a culture thing. He's established a really nice culture. I think so much of what happened last year can be attributed to injuries. You know, they practice physical. They're not holding back, and got a lot of guys banged up last year.
Always a balance.
Weren't able to get back on the field, and we'll see, man, if they have a reasonable level of health this year.
Yeah.
To me, they're an 8-win floor team. If they are healthy and things come together along the offensive line, they have a chance to get back to winning 9-10 games. We'll see if they do that. But that's the beauty of college football. We get to watch it all play out on the field every Saturday.
I think they got a really wide range of outcomes, and Missouri kind of does too. So it should be really interesting.
They do. And I think a lot of the hot seat talk is just based on what happened last year. I don't think there's much reality in that. So anyway, that's going to do it for this Locked On crossover edition of Locked On Mizzou and Locked On Sooners. Make sure you go check out Locked On Mizzou wherever you get your podcasts. It's free and available on all podcast platforms, and so is Locked On Sooners. Make sure you go check out The Portal with Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting analyst, covering all the top recruiting storylines and transfer portal stuff and the college football landscape in general for your second listen of the day. But until next time, he's John Miller. We'll talk to him in November. I'm John Williams. What do they say? Go Zoo. M-I-Z?
Yeah, I think that's Eli Drinkwitz has done the M-I-Z thing. It's caught on. We'll go with that.
Well, there you go. M-I-Z for them and Boomer Sooner.